Hi, HRN listeners. We're celebrating our 15th anniversary, and we have a really fun campaign and an ask for you. This 15th anniversary tour is aiming to bring you closer to unique food and music experiences in some of the most exciting cities in America. All the while, we're raising funds to support our work empowering the next generation of food system storytellers through our fellowship programs. Here's how it works. Donate to HRN and be entered into a raffle in the city of your choice to win a dinner for two at a noteworthy restaurant and tickets for two to a concert at a prominent local venue. We have incredible partners in New York, Los Angeles, Philadelphia, Nashville, Las Vegas, Charleston, Asheville, and Ardmore, Pennsylvania, who have donated a meal for two and two tickets to a concert of the winner's choice. And all donations help fund our fellowship programs, where we're helping to build essential workforce readiness skills and food system storytelling skills. Check out heritageradionetwork.org/15 to donate and enter to win today. That's heritageradionetwork.org/15. Thank you.
Today's program is brought to you by Heritage Foods USA, the nation's largest distributor of heritage breed pigs and turkeys. For more information, visit heritagefoodsusa.com.
You're listening to Heritage Radio Network. We're a member-supported food radio network broadcasting over 35 weekly shows live from Bushwick, Brooklyn. Join our hosts as they lead you through the world of craft brewing, behind the scenes of the restaurant industry, inside the battle over school food, and beyond. Find us at heritageradionetwork.org.
Hello, and welcome to A Hungry Society, the show where we talk about food, restaurants, food media, and so much more. Today's guest is Julia Turshen, prolific writer and author of two cookbooks, Small Victories and Feed the Resistance. She hosted the first two seasons of Radio Cherry Bombe and has written for Vogue, Bon Appétit, Food and Wine, Saveur, Self, Tea Magazine, the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, and so much more. She currently lives in upstate New York with her wife, dogs, and cat.
That is accurate.
Welcome, Julia.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
It's so exciting to have you here.
Oh, that's really nice. I'm happy to be here.
So, Feed the Resistance.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about this awesome book?
Sure. Yeah, Feed the Resistance is it's a little book with a lot in it. That's my new way of describing it. It is a book full of recipes and ideas for ways to get involved. So that means everything from kind of, cooking for your community to sort of understanding that, food justice also means racial justice, all these amazing things. And the content is from both myself and over 20 contributors, a really amazing group of folks, and all of the proceeds go to the ACLU. Mm-hmm. So I think that's the shortest way I can describe it. I'm working on my elevator pitch, but
and you have essays in there from people like Tunde Wei,
mm-hmm.
Talking about how dining and sex are very similar. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit, give us a preview of some of the other essays?
Yeah.
In the book?
Yeah, that's a great example of when I was approaching contributors, I wasn't at all prescriptive. So I didn't go to Tunde and be like, how are food and sex? I hadn't really thought. I mean, anyway, that's another show. So sorry, what was the question?
Can you give us an idea of some of the other essays in the book?
Sorry. So there's that one from Tunde. There's an amazing essay from Shakira Simley, who's based in San Francisco, about so much, basically about sort of kind of racial justice and the kind of fight for good food. And it's a personal essay. It's about her and her brother. She just writes really powerfully. So there's that. There's an essay from Caleb Zigas, who runs La Cocina also in San Francisco, about how he got involved and what that organization does. And it's a sort of, in a brief description would be, it's an incubation program for women-owned businesses. There's an incredible essay from Jordan Lexton, who runs Drive Change New York. And Jordan is just one of my heroes. And it's a food truck program that employs and kind of empowers formerly incarcerated, mostly young people, it's like one of just the most proactive organizations I know of. Jordan, I asked Jordan, that was one where I was like, oh, I have something specific in mind. And I was like, how can food like end recidivism? And Jordan was like, well, as long as the criminal justice system exists, that won't end. But here's how food can heal. And it's like this amazing thing. And then there's two really kind of like organizing essays. One from Callie Jane, who's the lead organizer of the Kingston, New York chapter of Citizen Action, which is an organization I'm involved with. And Callie gave us sort of ground rules for activism. And then Mickey Halpin wrote the essay that opens the book, basically about how to be a practical activist, how to essentially figure out what it is you can contribute, and then how to kind of maintain the stamina for whatever that contribution is.
Wow.
I think that's all the essays. Yeah, yeah.
I think what's so interesting about Feed the Resistance is that in food media, often we try to think of food as apolitical or conflict-free. You know, it's our safe space to just enjoy and be comforted.
Sure, yeah.
And the perspective that you take with the book is it can be so much more than that.
Absolutely.
It doesn't have to be apolitical.
Yeah. Because it isn't.
Right.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, I've definitely, I've operated in my career kind of going with that assumption that it, just it's its own thing to be enjoyed and whatever. And I've worked on a bunch of cookbooks that have nothing to do with politics and stuff like that. But I guess just the more I kind of thought about it, and then especially in the wake of this election, I was like, oh, I don't think we can afford that luxury anymore.
Right.
And those of us who have had the luxury of just enjoying that privilege, like, I think that needs to end. Yeah.
So gathering around food, using food and dining as a way to resist, to create activism.
Yeah, I think so much about the book and so much about, I guess, my life now is just about connecting these dots between food, which is, it's interesting. I was talking to someone yesterday. They were like, oh, but can't, I didn't agree with this, but they were saying, like, can't food just be this thing we enjoy? And, like, why does it have to be so political? And I was like, it can be both things. Like, we can, just because, like, you understand how political it is and that everything we eat has a political ramification, from who grew the food to where you're purchasing it to who you're eating it with, what you're talking about while you're eating it, on and on and on. Just because I think, we acknowledge everything about it, it doesn't mean we can't enjoy it anymore.
Right.
I don't know why it has to be one or the other.
Yeah. It's definitely not one dimensional.
No.
There's a lot of dimensions to that.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is why it's so great.
Right.
Right.
So you talk about Feed the Resistance and how you lead a non-resistant life. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Wait, what do you mean by that? Sorry. Did I say that?
Yeah, you did.
Okay.
You said that.
Like when, I know what you're saying. Okay, sorry. I think, I can definitely talk about that because I think within that, I think it's definitely me acknowledging my own privilege very much. And sort of basically after the election, I mentioned Citizen Action New York, which is a grassroots organization. There's branches all over New York State, and there's organizations like that all over the country. After the election, I felt like many people kind of upset and concerned and, frustrated and very much desperate for something to do. And so I went to some meetings at Citizen Action and some other meetings in my area, like our local chapter of Surge and stuff like that. And I, started doing things like phone banking and that kind of stuff and, letters and canvassing and all that. And it felt to me like, such important work and work that I was happy to do and, happy to have the time and energy to do. But it felt like an exception from, my kind of day-to-day life, which didn't involve that much activism at all. And so then when I sort of connected the dots that my work in food can also be my work as an activist, it helped me understand that my role in the resistance can very much mirror my role in my non-resisting life. I can use food as a tool to affect change. And Feed the Resistance outlines, so many of the different ways you can do that. Everything from, just reading a recipe written by someone who doesn't look like you, and they tell their story in it, and you can really understand whatever that food means to that person, and maybe how you can make it, at your own table, to thinking about who's around your table, what are you talking about, and then everything also to like a list of organizations where you can kind of give money, time, all different kinds of resources. So there's sort of, a million ways to get involved.
Right. And I think that's what's so cool about the book is that I think a lot of people feel powerless because they're not sure how to incorporate activism or resisting into their lives, and I think as a writer or a cookbook author, you could have easily been like, oh, that's not mine. Yeah. I don't have to touch that.
Yeah, definitely.
But you found a way to mesh the two.
Absolutely.
And fold it into the work that you do.
Yeah, well, thanks. Yeah, I think it's, it's we're on the radio, so you can't see. I love the way you just like had your hands crossed and like brought them like to your heart when you're talking about like bringing like activism into your life. And I think that's so true. And I think finding ways we can all weave it into our day-to-day life, into what we do, because I think we have to. I don't think we have the choice not to. And I think it feels like a choice for lots of people. And I think honestly, I think it's irresponsible not to make that choice. And
there's history.
Absolutely.
To it too. Yeah. And you talked about that in your New York Times op-ed about the resistance is hungry.
Yeah, definitely. And that was, it was very important for me when I was putting the book together, that I, reached out to a diverse group of contributors, and also looked backwards. I think often the answer to how to move forward is sometimes to look backwards. And, I think there's actually a friend, Crystal Mack. Do you know her? Mm-hmm. Yeah, she's awesome. You're from Maryland, you were saying.
Yes.
Yeah, she's in Baltimore. Hi, Crystal.
Hi, Crystal. Shout out to Crystal.
Crystal I think it was on her, I basically feel like I speak to Crystal every day because of her Instagram stories.
Yeah.
And I think it was yesterday she put something about not everyone has to like reinvent the wheel. Like we don't all have to start something new. And you can kind of weave into things that already exist. And it's something I believe in so much. And, so for me and really understanding food's role in the resistance, a lot of clarity for that answer came from looking backwards. And that was something that I was really educated by a lot of the people who contributed to the book. And Cheryl Day, who's this incredible baker who's based in Savannah, Georgia. She and her husband run Back in the Day Bakery. They're also great authors. They've written great books. I reached out to Cheryl to contribute a recipe, and she gave what's looking like one of the most popular recipes, these chocolate espresso bars. I keep seeing them pop up on social media. And when Cheryl offered the recipe, she was like, these are inspired by Georgia Gilmore, who ran the Club from Nowhere during the Montgomery bus boycotts. And Cheryl was telling me about Georgia and what Georgia's sort of meant to her, and what that inspiration was. And it was it's such an amazing example of the legacy of how food has been part of resistance of the civil rights movement. In Georgia's Club from Nowhere was this group of women who cooked and baked and basically sold their food as, just a way to feed all the people who, were boycotting. But they also got to use those funds to pay for things like, gasoline and spare tires and stuff like that for the cars that were, transporting people because they weren't using the buses. And it was a way that Georgia, as, a black woman who worked for a white family at the time, she could be involved without being on the front lines of, say a march or something, because not everyone can afford to just leave their jobs or, stuff like that. So it's a great example of food is, I think, it's one of the most accessible things in the world and one of the most accessible ways to understand how to get involved. And I think it's also offers a lot of the not so obvious ways to get involved. I think a lot of people feel that sort of powerlessness you were talking about. And then it's like, oh, but, I can't just, I'm making this up, stop and go to every march or whatever. But it's like, there's things you can do that aren't the most extreme.
Participate.
Yeah.
So we're going to switch gears a little bit and talk about your process as a cookbook author. I read or I heard that you, before you start a cookbook, you actually watch cooks in their kitchens with recipes, and you will even measure out ingredients and then see what's left over after they make the recipe. If they left any spices or if they didn't, or...
that's my sneaky way.
Am I blowing up your spot?
No, not
your
at all.
Process?
No, it's a good technique. I'm all for it. I mean, every book I've worked on, whether it's been, helping someone out on their book, co-authoring a book, working on my own, every single book I've worked on, the process has been a little bit different. And I think if there was one right way to, write a cookbook, I'd probably be out of business. Like everyone would just be doing that. So it's different each time. And when I work with other people on their books and it's, their recipes, I do spend a lot of time, just watching them cook. And it's a funny thing because the sort of literal, I guess, bread and butter of my work is writing recipes. So I write instructions for other people to make something, but I am a cook that doesn't really follow recipes. Like I'm an intuitive cook. I kind of, take whatever, and I think a lot of the people I work with have shared that. And so I think the best way to record their food and their recipes is to just have them cook and watch what they're doing. And over the years, I've gotten pretty good at kind of guesstimating, if that's a word, like amounts of things, but I do try to kind of slip in a measuring cup here and there. And the best thing is if you're working with someone to basically pour, olive oil, whatever, into measuring cups before. It takes a lot of kind of legwork, but then you write down how much you start with, and then at the end you see how much is left. So then you get like this really precise measurement. And they can cook intuitively. They're not stopping to measure olive oil, which most people don't actually do when they're cooking. But then I get to record these really accurate measurements to translate into a recipe. So so I do that, and then I write the recipe. I take notes while I'm observing, and then I write the recipe, and then I test all the recipes I write. And then when I work on my own recipes, my own books, the process is a little different because I actually I don't start in the kitchen, I start on the page. I write the recipe. I kind of think about whatever it is that I want to make, and I think about how I would make it, and I write it down, and then I print that piece of paper out. And I take it with me into my kitchen. I have my red pens, and I follow the recipe. Like I test it. I make it as if someone had just been like, "Hey, try this thing." And as I'm making it, I'm sort of troubleshooting and adjusting. If I said something, it'll take 10 minutes, but it really takes 5, or whoa, that's way too much vinegar, like kind of thing. So I like that process because, in general, whether it's a recipe or any piece of writing, like I try to just get something down on the page and then kind of work off of it, because I like working with like the thing as opposed to the idea of the thing. So that's kind of my process for my own stuff.
Do you have a favorite recipe from Feed the Resistance?
Oh, that's a hard question. That's so hard. Well, let's see. Those chocolate espresso bars are really good. So that's like a really good sweet thing. It's hard to pick because okay, I'm just going to go with the one that came to the top of my head, which is actually Preeti Mistry. We were sort of talking about her earlier. Preeti gave her recipe for tikka masala macaroni and cheese, and it's so good. Like it's. I'm not a big mac and cheese person. I mean, what's not to love? It's like pasta and cheese, and usually other creamy, wonderful things. But Preeti's is it's so good. Like when I made it, I was like, oh, I can't stop eating this. And normally I test recipes all the time, and I'm pretty good at I'll have a bite of it, check the, seasonings or whatever. And then I give it away. But I was like, oh, this one is hard to let go of. Yeah, that one's really, really good. And the kind of spice mixture you make for it is definitely, I would definitely encourage anyone making it to make, because if you're going to go to sort of the trouble of getting the spices and grinding them and stuff, definitely make quadruple the amount and just put it on everything. It's delicious.
That sounds delicious.
Now I'm thinking about other recipes I really like too. But so those two, I'll start with those.
Awesome. So we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back with more Hungry Society.
Heritage Foods USA is a farm-to-table online butcher and founding sponsor of Heritage Radio Network.
Heritage Foods got its start when Patrick Martin's first stepped foot onto Frank Reese's Kansas farm in 2001. Back then, Frank was the only farmer in America raising true heritage turkeys, with recorded lineages tracing back more than 150 years.
Patrick knew instantly he'd found a unique moment, an opportunity to go beyond acknowledging these breeds as being jeopardized and to actually do something to save them. Patrick asked Frank to ramp up production and made a promise to him that if he would raise them, Heritage Foods USA would sell them.
That was the moment that Heritage Food's slogan, "Eat 'em to save 'em," was born. By creating a market for delicious meats from heritage breeds, we can ensure they'll be around for generations to come.
Plus, heritage breeds just taste a whole lot better. Learn more at heritagefoodsusa.com and use the code HeritageRadio for 2 free pork chops with your first order, brother.
Welcome back to A Hungry Society. I'm here with Julia Turshen, cookbook author, writer, resistor.
Dog lover.
So we're going to switch to talking about dining.
Cool.
Do you have a favorite restaurant at the moment?
It's funny because I feel like if you asked me this question a few years ago when I lived here in New York City, I could give you a whole list, but I now live in the country about 2 hours north, and I never go out to eat. But I guess in New York or just in general?
In general.
In general. There is, so I don't live in Kingston, New York, but it's the closest big city to us, the big old city. And there's this little kind of triangle, I guess it's in probably Midtown Kingston. I get the neighborhoods mixed up, where there are these 3 places that I love. And one is a Oaxacan restaurant called Just For You. And one's a Jamaican restaurant called Top Taste. And then this new restaurant that this young woman opened called Ruby May's. I think Ruby May's Soul Food is the title. The title. I always think about book titles. And that little triangle, they're all really close to each other. And I love all those restaurants so much. So those are the ones I probably go to the most lately. And
all 3 of them would be.
Yeah, I like them all a lot. In New York City, I think my favorite, and this is so different than any of those, is Isodi, which is Rita Sodi's restaurant on Christopher Street. It's it's special. It's great.
That's great. Without naming names, or you can name them if you want to.
Okay.
Can you talk about one of the worst dining experiences you've had?
Honestly, I'll eat anything. I really, I feel like I'm not too discriminate when it comes to what I eat or where I eat. I'm always happy if someone else is cooking. I don't have to do the dishes. That's great. The first thing that came to mind is it had nothing to do with the food or the place, but it was a few months ago, and I was at a diner near our house in upstate New York, and I was with my wife, and we were sitting in a booth having breakfast, and the guy in the booth behind us was eating alone and was on his cell phone. So it was like he was with someone else because he was having a really loud conversation and not afraid to take up a lot of space in that space. And he made, I'm Jewish, and not that really matters for the story, but he made an anti-Semitic joke on the phone, out loud in this, and it was my whole, even thinking about it, it wasn't directed at me. It wasn't, it wasn't sort of quote unquote personal, but it was I couldn't get out of that diner fast enough. And it was it just, it kind of so burst that bubble. And I love diners and I love that diner. And I was you just ruined this diner for me.
Right.
So that was definitely, I think probably, one of the worst things. And it had nothing to do with the place. Yeah.
I was actually having a conversation with someone recently about, the need for restaurant dining rooms to be safe spaces. And that comes down to management and servers feeling empowered enough to step in and be okay, you're not going to do that here.
Yeah.
You have to go.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And restaurants are, they're places that we all, that's an important conversation. And they're places we all kind of enter with this sort of unspoken agreement that we're all, we're going to sit close to each other. We're going to, people have really important moments at restaurants. People, go through celebrations, they go through grief, they go through, make business deals. And so, a lot happens in restaurants, and a lot of different people go to restaurants. And I think there's an assumption that I think we'll all kind of respect each other. And then when that assumption gets broken, it can be a little startling.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. So as a writer, you kind of watch like dining culture become what it is today. What do you make of like the dining scene in New York or even nationwide, since you work with so many different chefs?
What do I make of it? I mean, the thing I always think about is kind of the opposite. Like, how do we get more people to eat at home? As a person who writes recipes for home cooks and someone who cooks at home and eats like 95% of my meals at home, that's always kind of top of mind. But I think in general, the state of dining, I mean, I'm no expert on this. I think the thing I would love to see continue to evolve and change is just more people investing in women and minority-run restaurants. I think that is so important, and I think when it comes to how restaurants and the food prepared in them and the people preparing the food, how that's all spoken about sort of culturally, like so much of that is informed by just how much money places have, like how much can they spend to make a place look nice, how much can they spend on PR, how much can they spend on comping someone's meal, all that kind of stuff. And I think if there were more people investing in restaurants that sort of better reflected the people who live in this country, I think that would be really great.
Definitely.
Yeah.
It's interesting to hear you say that you think about how to convince people to eat at home, because I feel like, and maybe this is just because I think about I work from the restaurant space a lot.
Yes.
I'm like, oh, everybody eats at home. Like,
interesting.
Do you see that a little differently?
Yeah, I think I do, but I think it's also like, I think that assumption I have is based on like reading lots of like food media stuff, like magazines and blogs, because everyone's talking about restaurants all the time. I mean, also recipes to make at home, but sometimes those recipes can feel a little bit daunting, I think. And I mean, I definitely am guilty of writing recipes that are like, I'll make it to test the recipe, but I'm not going to make that again. Like, I cook really simply, but I definitely in my own work definitely make an effort to try to make things as simple as possible, because I think cooking at home is such a wonderful thing. It tends to be better for you. It's better for the environment. It's cheaper. But the thing that's most important to me is it means you're probably sitting down with someone who means something to you and having a meal. And so anything I can do to help make that happen is that's my mission.
What about those like dump and stir videos that like clog up Facebook
the
feeds
like overhead, like
yeah, and it's like cheese is involved always somehow.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm all for all of it, because I feel like if it gets people excited about stuff, and I'm not on Facebook, but my wife Grace is always showing me her mom, my mother-in-law, is always, I guess, I don't know what you would call it, reposting them,
sharing.
Yeah. Because I think she like loves those. So that's kind of when I see them, because Grace is like, look at this one my mom likes. I think if it gets people into the kitchen, that's great. I think it gets a little repetitive, I guess.
Yeah. It also gets kind of ridiculous.
Yeah. I guess the thing about them that I don't love is I am usually, I am way more interested in the story behind the food kind of than the food itself. And so those kind of don't always leave room for the, you don't know about who came up with the recipe or who, was inspired to do it or what their story was or anything like that. So I'm usually kind of in it for the story, and that's kind of missing in those for me.
Yeah.
But I mean, they're fun to watch.
They're easily digestible.
Yeah.
Like you can just watch a bunch of them. I wonder though if it actually does get people into the kitchen, or do we just enjoy
like while you're waiting for your takeout, you're watching those?
You're watching the dump and stir videos.
Yeah.
Does it actually encourage people to cook, or is it just a comforting thing to watch someone, even if it's just hands?
Yeah. I mean, my theory about like food television shows, I think extends to this. I think people watch them and don't always cook from them because I think they're just, it's going to end well. Like, I feel like in this,
right.
In this world we live in, it's like, it's nice to watch something that has like a beginning, middle, end, and
an appetizer, entree, and a dessert.
And like, I'd love to see those videos when like something just doesn't turn out, because that happens. But they're also like perfect. And,
right.
Like, there's not like a movement wasted or anything.
And there's very cheery music.
Yeah.
And
I mean, they're chipper.
No, it's just hands.
Yeah.
You don't know if they're like happy or sad or anything.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess I'm not against them, but I guess I'm not. I don't consume many of them.
Have you had any like cooking instances or like dinner parties that have not gone well?
I feel like dinner parties not. I feel like it's all gone pretty well. I mean, I've done a lot before in my. I mean, I'm not very old. I was about to say my youth, but I mean, I used to live in a series of tiny like studio apartments in New York, but I've always cooked, and I used to always have like people come over and be like, no, here, you can sit right on the floor here. But I guess that's not a disaster. That's fine. But I've had a lot of uncomfortable meals at home just because of the space. But yeah, things have I always feel like it's just dinner. Like if you mess something up, like you can order the pizza or whatever, like the thing that's important is just getting people to show up. So.
How many people were you trying to put in your...
Oh, God. My first apartment, which was in college, because I went to school in New York, and I, for 2 years, lived in this tiny little studio apartment that was not very nice, and I thought it was the greatest thing in the world. And I ordered from LL Bean, I ordered dog beds to use as, like, floor cushions. That was my dining room, and I had, like, a stack of them, and then I would have friends over.
And they got their own dog bed.
Because it was, like, this... comfortable thing to put on the floor. I forgot about those.
That's really fun. Do you still have them? Or
no, and I now actually have dogs, but I don't know what I did with those. Do you ever think about like the stuff you've accumulated?
Yeah.
Like, where did it go?
Where is that?
Yeah.
Probably it's for the best.
Yeah. I hope some dogs are happy on them somewhere. I really don't know what I did with them. Anyway.
So if you could have your last meal in a restaurant, where would it be and who's invited?
So I wanted to ask you about this question because I've heard you ask. So can I like kind of go back in time? Can I just make this anything? Or does it have to be a restaurant that like exists?
No. You can make it whatever.
Because my answer is not totally a restaurant, but close. And it would be my maternal grandparents, who I never met, ran a bread bakery in Brooklyn. And it's like where my mom and my aunts grew up and everything. And it's actually still a bakery, but it's not my family's bakery. But if I could kind of have my last meal in a sort of restaurant / kind of public food space, I would kind of turn back the clock and have it there with my family.
What are you
kind
eating?
Of past and present.
The bread or?
Yeah, the bread, fresh, like really good challah. I think my Aunt Renee, who's no longer with us, but maybe she could be for that meal. She could make her chicken soup, which was it's like my favorite food in the world. It's on the cover of my first cookbook. It's like, that to me is like the best food. Yeah, maybe chicken soup and hot bread and some cake. Yeah.
And anything to drink, like tea, coffee,
I mean,
wine.
I guess there'd be no hangover, right?
Right. Yeah. You don't have to worry about a hangover.
Yeah. So I guess I'm not really a huge drinker, but I guess I would just drink champagne.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That sounds like a great meal, actually. Like a great pairing.
All very beige, but that's all right.
You're thinking like a cookbook author, yeah. Because you're like, that doesn't photograph well.
Exactly.
And you said your aunt's there.
Yeah. Yeah, my family, I would have my whole family, mom's side, dad's side, my wife, who didn't, wasn't able to meet some of those people. Or dogs. Yeah. No, I'm just
gotta have
sad.
the dogs.
Yeah.
Yeah. And no dog beds.
No dog. Yeah. They can they can have a seat at the table. They normally do, if I'm being honest.
Well, that's awesome. Julia, it was a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Have you?
Yeah. Thanks for having me on. I love your show and happy to be on it.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for listening, and we'll catch you next week on The Hungry Society.
Thanks for listening to Heritage Radio Network, food radio supported by you. For our freshest content and to hear about exclusive events, subscribe to our newsletter. Enter your email at the bottom of our website, heritageradionetwork.org. Connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at heritage_radio. Heritage Radio Network is a nonprofit organization driving conversations to make the world a better, fairer, more delicious place. And we couldn't do it without support from listeners like you. Want to be a part of the food world's most innovative community? Rate the shows you like, tell your friends, and please join our community by becoming a member. Just click on the beating heart at the top right of our homepage. Thanks for listening.
Hey there, I'm Lee Ullman here with some big news from the National Young Farmers Coalition. We're partnering with Heritage Radio Network on a special season of The Farm Report. It's all about what's happening with the Farm Bill and how it impacts farmers and eaters.
I am growing diversified vegetables on land that's been in our family for 150 years.
And so with the pandemic, gentrification, property values going up, we had to sell the land and we lost it.
Join us as we uncover the untold stories behind this massive piece of legislation that shapes how we grow our food, what we eat, and so much more.
The problems we have had, those are things that come from earlier Farm Bill and USDA policy, right? Like Earl Butts, get big or get out.
You know, it's my responsibility to know not only what I'm eating, but then like how that all came to be. And realize like, wow, like this piece of legislation, all this money, like it's technically something that I support as a taxpayer.
While Congress debates the next Farm Bill, this is not just an invitation to listen. It's a call to action. Be part of the conversation. Subscribe to the Farm Report on Heritage Radio Network, wherever you listen to podcasts.